Hello and welcome everyone back to another episode of Energy Unleashed. My name is Suzanne Worthley with my co-host Kim Hess, who is all velvety
I'm
today.
velvety. I'm so soft. Yeah.
For those of you that might not know us, we are discussing different energy situations or kind of like concepts that I come across as an energy practitioner with my clients. And then I typically don't tell Kim a whole lot about it so that we can get an organic reaction, kind of like what
So
you
that
listen
can
to.
like
Yeah,
what?
that face, like, huh? uh, which is my favorite part, so that we can kind of like collaborate on things that we can do energetically and all learn from one another. So this particular one, Kim, actually comes directly out of my Confident Empath book. Oh, wait, shameless plug. Hold on. There you go. This is the book that I launched this year. And this particular story comes directly out of a chapter of this book because it does resonate to a lot of my different client situations and or my own personal story. And it is about releasing your story, like letting go of your story. So I'll give you the concept and then we can kind of play with it further. So basically speaking, most human beings energetically hold a story about their self, a narrative about their self. And it is literally like a script that we run in our head. Now, oftentimes we create these in childhood. We might not be even the creator of them. It might be imposed on by our family, by society, by whatever. And the hard part is we take this narrative on and then we feed that storyline, and then it becomes our truth. It becomes who and what we think that we are. And I think this is important because I'm going to kind of dovetail two different client things. A lot of clients end up in my office and they say, I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know why I'm here. Like, what is my purpose? And then oftentimes we'll have this story narrative that tells me my purpose.
Mhm.
And those might not really ever line up. So the person is confused, or they line up so hard that this is my purpose because it's created by someone else. And I never truly find my own organic purpose. So this gets really messy because it can kind of interweave and really create a trajectory in our life that isn't necessarily in alignment with my higher self.
Yes,
Does that make
it
sense to you that
does.
we're
It
diving in
does.
here? Okay.
Yeah, no, it does because my story. I want to put out there that along the way we make decisions that change our story too, right? Like
Hopefully, yeah.
right. So when you're thinking about what you learn from your parents, school, church, like all of the grandparents, all of the different things of what is expected of you. I think that you can start to develop that story, which is what I did
Okay.
myself, of what I should be and how I should be with others. And that story stayed with me. It's still, I actually work on that.
I know it's
I
still
work
you.
on that.
I see it kind of sneak out of the closet once in a while.
I
You
know.
had
I
you
know.
had that story really strong when I met you. When we first met each other coming to me as a client years ago, you were very much still in a piece of that story because your story evolves. So maybe you want to tell the listeners what your childhood structure story was in the pecking order of the family and what that created and how that led into a corporate life story.
Yeah, I think well, I'm the oldest child of two. I have a sister that's younger, and um, I my parents went through a really tough time financially, but they had a baby younger than my sister that passed away. And so the hardships that brought on and the
Mhm.
sadness and a lot of the uncertainty and all the grief, all the things that they were going through really impacted me and my story,
Mhm.
because my goal then, even as a 4-year old, was to try not to make waves too much, to be a
Keep
good
it easy.
girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
You're a good
to
girl.
help manage my sister to be a good girl, which
Yeah.
was really difficult. And then took this, it took kind of took the back seat in some places because, I had a sister that died. And then when my younger sister turned 4, she had to have a kidney removed. And so she was in the hospital for 2 weeks. So my
Wow.
parents were absent a lot during that time. I stayed with relatives, which was, all fine, all the things, but where I sat in the family really dramatically changed by the time I was 6 years old.
Wow.
Um, and how I was, I think, personality wise during that time, it changed. And it was, my goal was to try and make everyone else happy and not sad.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so that took me into, all the way through school. I think that I protected myself a lot going through the school years because I didn't want to disappoint anybody.
Yeah.
I would not give my whole self necessarily because I didn't want people to um, be unhappy with who I was.
Hmm.
And so while I still had a strong person in me, I was very determined to do certain things. I know I held myself back in that childlike, especially the childlike being that I was.
Mhm.
Um, and so it led into running my own business for many years, going off to college, running my own business, and then getting into the corporate world. I took a lot of those traits of not taking huge risks while I took risks. It was always a conservative kind of risk because I didn't want to fail. I didn't want to disappoint anyone, and I didn't want to disappoint myself really either.
Hmm.
And through that whole time, through all of that timeline, I really held parts of myself back and
Yeah.
really didn't step back to enjoy what was right there in the moment, because I was always looking forward, planning, doing all the things that came with those types of jobs, and even including my family. We're going
Mhm.
to be this way. It's going to be like this, and we're all going to be good. Yeah. No.
Yeah. It's hard to be the good one.
Yeah. And it was all me, my expectations and my perception, because I
Yep.
know I wasn't good all the way through that. I did things,
Yeah.
but I
I
really did
did
worry
things.
about that. But
You go, I did things.
I did too, like naughty things here and there, but
Yeah. I
um
think your version of naughty is a little gooder than naughty.
it
Gooder.
is.
Yeah. Uh,
It
Because
is.
even when I met you, you were still really, and this is quite a few years ago, you were still concerned about being good and being the good one. It was a really identifiable thing for you. And I think what's important for listeners to understand is that we create these stories because they're given to us with parameters,
Mhm.
outlines, validation, etc. But you said, we're the one that feed that storyline and become our truth. We're the ones that feed that and ask for validation, which locks it in even more. And it's really hard to have those labels, and we give labels all the time. And so watch that if you're maybe a parent also. Are you labeling one of your children the good one? Are you labeling someone the bad sheep? I had the client the other day that literally within the first 5 minutes said, well, I'm the black sheep of the family. And I thought, oh my gosh, you're
The
still
label.
carrying that. You're carrying
Mhm.
that. That's so hard to carry because that's such an energy leak of I'm always going to be that one, that bad one, the black one, the dark one, the one that causes trouble. These are all energy leaks for our ego, and it's really difficult. So, we choose to keep validating that. He could have dropped that at any time.
Well, and honestly, the validation that I'm good was like
Mhm.
the driver, absolutely at the core of I didn't think I needed validation. And as I looked back and started to really go inward, validation was hugely important for everything that I did as a
Yeah.
mother, wife, and in the work job for sure, and a daughter, niece, granddaughter, all of it.
This goes and okay,
Mhm.
this is something I want to really clarify too. There are our stories, and then there are stories that we live, and then we also do, not everybody, but some people that I'm aware of also client wise, create a story for down the line. Like, I can't wait till I'm this age to do this. I
Mhm.
can't wait till I'm this age. And so this is a whole nother version to unleash in terms of I can't wait till I'm old so that I have the ability to speak my mind. Okay.
Mhm.
That's because I have a narrative that says I can't speak my mind when I'm younger. And I put this energy outlet down the future, which doesn't exist, by the way. And I push myself to want that in a future timeline. So, what am I doing? I'm already creating a pathway to getting old faster. so that I can have what I want instead of just owning what I want. That was a
Yeah.
lot, but did you get that?
Think what that does for your, not only
Oh,
your psyche, your
right?
emotions, but your body.
Yeah.
You're like telling yourself you want to be old.
It's
Like,
like, oh, my grandma used to do this when she was really old, and I can't wait to do that. And I'm really only 27. And now all of a sudden I've aged to 47 when I'm 27 in a mindset. And
yeah.
I push that. The really sad part is I become my grandma faster and quicker in every way, shape, or form because I'm pushing that narrative and that timeline
Mhm,
ahead of myself. And it's all fake. It's weird.
mhm,
What one wants to do is dissect that down if they choose and say, what are the attributes about grandma that you feel
mhm.
are, is it freedom? Is it ability to say her truth with nothing attached? What is it? And modify that and bring it into your timeline so that you're not playing with time.
Yeah, that's and the timeline thing, the concept of timeline is always difficult of
Yep.
like, looking at the past, present, future, and what you're doing with those. But um I really truly believe that in your core, you really have to go inward and figure out what brings you joy and passion and all the things that you love and
Yeah.
bring those things forward. You know,
And be
um,
very clear that no one gets to write your story. We
mm,
discussed not all that long ago on a podcast, a client I had last week that, was told all of her life that she was expected to be a doctor because that's what her dad said. And so the confusion, the inner fight, the sadness, the torn, I'm guilty, I'm disappointed, all of that stuff has dictated how she actually experiences reality. And that is not fair to anyone. And these are really things that happen quite often. I expect my kid to do this, I expect my kid to do that. We live vicariously through others in so many ways
mm,
that it's ridiculous because we're losing our own moment and going inside for that.
yeah.
This is when the person doesn't know their purpose. The purpose is for each of us, and take what resonates here, but I mean, the overall purpose for being a vehicle is because source energy doesn't have a vehicle to experience itself in. And we are a creational vehicle to have experiences and co-create experiences in any way, shape, or form we individually choose
Mhm.
with consequences attached, good, bad, and ugly, because that's how source knows itself and that's how we know ourselves and that's how creational reality works. And so beyond that, is there purpose? Sure. My
Mhm.
soul purpose is this, my soul essence is this, my family biology is this. So there's lots and lots of levels of purpose, in my opinion, being a practitioner. But we don't find purpose by somebody else giving us a storyline. We find purpose, like you said, by going inward and finding the passion and what ignites us in love and light. And that isn't very easy for some people.
Well,
Some people like the story.
I I didn't even know. I mean, I think meeting with you, you said you need to figure out your story. Like your
Yep.
story is what's driving your life. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, could that be driving my life? Like,
Yeah.
this is opportunities have come my way. I've jumped on them or I haven't. And like life is just leading me through. And,
Yeah.
and when you really go inward, and for me, it was starting to journal and starting to
Good.
really touch base with what I felt about, many different types of things, where that started to open up more, to
Right.
realize, in fact, I had to go back into the corporate world for a period of time to really know that feeling of I don't belong here.
Yeah.
Because my story was so strong that I had to go
Right.
back into corporate and have a prestigious, job that paid a lot of money and all the things that I thought brought me happiness, to realize
Mhm.
that wasn't bringing me happiness. I was actually killing myself.
Right.
I was dying inside. And
Right.
that took a lot. It takes time, to go through that process and really figure it out.
And to peel back the layers of what the story is, for example, if I'm the good one, think how much I limit my life in choices, in thought patterns, in actions, in everything, interactions, because I stay in that mold, I stay in that. We have every right to be the bad one if we choose. We have every right to experience the so-called bad because there really isn't a good or a bad. It's just another version of. When we really start to understand the way life co-creates, there isn't a good person and a bad person. It is a person that is making individual choices, and that is the laws of the universe of cause and effect. If
Mhm.
I make this choice, I'm going to have this consequence. Again, maybe good, maybe bad, maybe
Right.
really ugly, right? But there isn't necessarily, when it comes to source, an allocation of a good or a bad title on that. We do that. So when we're the good one, it feels really okay sometimes to be the bad one, or I'm the nice one. What if I want to blow up at somebody?
Just
You know?
break out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't have to own that every single day, but if this is applicable for the moment, I get to do that because I'll take the consequence and so forth.
Mhm.
So there's limitations. There's also limitations on this, like I said, story that we create for our future, meaning, well, now I'm too old to do that. I don't want to go skydiving because I might die and hurt myself now. I can't even go on that vacation because I don't have the wherewithal to understand technology and I might get, lost. I don't know how to, book an airplane ticket by myself because I don't have any abilities. And all these things that we start to do, we can't. We get smaller and smaller in our world interactions because there's a lot of things that we can do. And this is a limitation that happens for many people as they age also, because now it's like I'm putting that storyline and thinking of my grandma or my dad or my whatever, and it's like, oh, I can't do that, I'm not going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I have this wonderful father who does this. Just you wait. It's the family joke. Just you wait. And he doesn't say, you just wait. It's just you wait. And he says it all the time. For example, he's walking across the room and up at the cabin. We're all like, geez, Dad, you look like you're 100 years old, even though he's really only 90. And we're all giving him a hard time. And he goes, just you wait. If we even implant that
Oh,
storyline, like,
yeah.
oh crap, that's my dad. I have that
Mhm.
DNA. Just you wait means I'm going to create that. So we play a lot in our family with that. I don't have to create that. You get to create that. That's your job on behalf of Source. I'm doing something different. So
Mhm.
we can modify and change our storyline at any time,
Right. Right.
right?
And it's interesting that, watching grandparents and parents, how much you take on,
Ugh.
some of that because, you think it's genetic, you
Oh
think
my
it's like
God. Are you kidding? For
right.
sure.
Yeah.
You think it's predestined fate because everybody else has diabetes, I'm gonna have it. Well,
Yeah.
no, I don't have that. I just don't
Right.
have that.
I'm not yeah, no, it's
Yeah,
not gonna happen. Yeah.
it's really, really, really difficult. So when we follow our story, oftentimes when I write about it, especially in the Confident Empath, it's about being the human doing machine. It's doing instead of finding that inner purpose of being, just being, finding passion, finding joy, creating what we want, taking responsibility for your co-creational life,
Mhm.
etc. So these are the differences of the corporate Kim, go, 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 do, or the so-called, let's say Zen Kim, who's, out hugging her tree up north going, this is great to be able to do this in life. So
Mhm.
it's important for us to know the human doing drive really usually indicates a little bit of a red flag of the false storyline.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and you know what was interesting is that I just had a milestone birthday in November, and my parents were up here, and it was so fun, to be with the family, and my mom and dad started telling stories about me as a toddler,
Yeah.
and what was interesting is that it totally validated that the stories kinda stopped at that 3, 4 years old.
Mm.
Because I was mischief. I was, like, loving and super social, but I was, like, my mom made 6 pies for the church bake sale, and I took a handful out of each one of them. Like
Nice.
I know, right? Like yeah, and, just little these stories were, really actually the kids got a really big kick out of them because they're like,
Mhm.
"What?"
That's not good, mom.
I know, but it was so childlike. I wonder if
Yeah.
this one tastes better than the next. Let's try
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
out. You just, I
That's
mean,
funny.
there were a bunch of stories like that. And then the stories kind of stopped at a certain point, um, because the childlike curiosity that I had changed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because of the outside circumstances, you don't get to control or not control the death of a sibling and the scenario of you moving and changing and growing up very quickly. You don't get to change all of that or even know that's happening. But the goal of this stuff is to analyze it as we go through life and make changes accordingly. It doesn't mean that we're not stuck in some difficult situations and getting handed a difficult storyline, right?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
I was working with a client the other day, and I'm telling you, her story, oh my God, it's just like, I don't even know how you're standing. I mean, the crap that this woman went through from day one, it's just like, I mean, I just kept going, okay, this can't get any worse. Like, you really aren't going to tell me more stuff, right? And she just kept going and going and going. And I'm like, I don't even know what you signed up for. This is ridiculous. So sometimes these stories just are very, very difficult because our soul is actually choosing a lot of karmic release and return to get rid of that. And so it's important for us to not judge somebody else's story either, to say,
Right.
wow, you got a really crap life, or you're really effed up because blah, blah. That isn't fair on anybody's account because we don't know what the soul is doing here for a difficult story.
Right. And if you
Right,
continue your story in a victim mode, I
right.
know a few people right now in my life that they're the victim. It's somebody else's fault, and this is the way I am. So I'm going to continue to abuse myself and,
Yep,
drown my sorrows. And, if you don't make that change, you're not ever going to get out of that mode. Like you
yep.
have to take responsibility for your own, direction. So,
So the fun part about the Confident Empath book is I do an event attached to that. We do it up at what's known as the Palmer House in Minnesota. And I've done it, what, 3, 4 times already, the event. And what's so interesting about that is if I meet a stranger and I do a class and I split people up and you have someone you don't know, and I sit you down and I say, tell me about your story. Just tell me about your story. Undeniably, every single time it's things like, well, I'm married and I have 4 adult kids and I have 5 grandkids and, like that, right? And that's how that plays out. And I've
yeah.
done this in various ways because it's so amazing. The human is so amazing. So that's how that typically would play out. You meet a stranger, you go for coffee, you're dating. Tell me about yourself. Well, I'm an RN and,
Mhm.
that's how that goes, right? When we do the Confident Empath actual interactive retreat weekend prior to the chapter on Tell Your Story, we actually do a different exercise where you are really challenging detrimental belief systems that have really limited you in your life from persons that have given you your story boundaries. Meaning, my mom always treated me like this, my dad, my partner, my whatever, my sibling. And we have them put that so-called energy of that person in a chair across from them. We all have earplugs in, nobody can hear each other. And they go through a feelings release exercise that gives them the opportunity to realize how false that story is.
Mhm.
And they're doing this purging and this purging, and they're taking their power back from this so-called invisible person in the chair. And it is a profound exercise. Right on the heels of that, after a break and some other information, we then do the exercise, tell me your story. And
Mhm.
what is so amazing is it's a completely different sharing.
Mhm.
It isn't, I'm an RN, I have 2 kids and 4 grandkids. That may come into play a little bit, but that's probably way behind the fact of, gosh, I'm at this age and I'm really finding out that my purpose hasn't been here and my passions are really buried. And, it
Yeah.
completely
Yeah.
changes the awareness of the story and
Yeah.
how false our masks are and how many masks we put on. And it is one of the most profound things I've seen when I do teaching. I think it's fascinating. And you've done it, you've watched it, and
I
it's
know, and I'm just
incredible.
gonna say, I was horrified when you said, "Tell your story to somebody," and I'm like, "Wow!" I immediately my brain went to, I'm a mother, I live here, and I had this. I used to be a VP of this company, and I used to da 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 da. It was used to's,
Yep.
like I am in used to's, and um, I realized that I never sat down to think about my story now.
Mm-mm.
And so we're so practiced when you're in the business world or when you're, working with other parents, like your kids are involved in activities, you're
Mhm.
always continually telling your story
Yeah.
of who you are, what you are, and make it good because I want to be important.
Yeah.
And so when I sat down to do that, I'm like, oh God, I don't really, what's my story? Like I
Right.
just was horrified. And so
And
it,
think how uncomfortable it is to have the nerve to say, I'm really hitting the down dirt of what and who I am in the last couple of years. I'm really falling to pieces so that I can actually build myself up again. I'm really finding out that I have been and really owning the dark night, the dark sides of us to be able to go, wow, I'm digging through the falsities and actually finding out it's like peeling back the layers of the onion and finding the heart in there going, wow, that's who I actually am and can be even more of. And it's embarrassing, it's humiliating, it's uncomfortable, and it's fascinating
Oh,
all at the
so
same time.
fascinating.
And it's
'Cause I
healing.
was really like looking at this other person on the other side of me going, um,
Hmm.
well, I just, it wasn't coming to me. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like,
Yep.
but it's
Yep.
so healing to
Yeah.
then take that time to, you know, think about you're creating, you're co-creating what you are right now, what you want to be,
Hmm.
in the future. And I try not to do too much future. You have to do it for some things.
Hmm.
But the more that I go into the future, the less I am in the moment. So it's
Right.
really hard to,
Or the past.
yeah,
Or
or
the,
the past. Yeah.
like you said,
Right.
I was and on the other hand, I really want to point out to listeners that it is important sometimes to have different, what we would call masks, because sometimes maybe I still have to be a mother Suzanne or a this Suzanne. But the more that you spiritual journey, in my opinion, those masks all come off one after another, because you have the ability to merge all of those beings together. They
Mhm.
don't become so separate. They don't become, I have to act this way or say this or don't say this when I'm in this presence of, but
Mhm.
there's still sometimes in a social situation where it's acceptable or not to cross boundaries or whatever. And those are always going to be there. But I think the more we journey, the more those lines get super blurry.
They do. They
Right.
do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think that's really important. One of the things that I wanted to say also is when your story changes and you start to really own your true story of what you really choose to present to the world, how you walk through this world, there is a ripple effect to everybody else's story that was in your initial story.
Right. There
And this
is.
gets messy because if I'm the nice one in the family, and you're the black sheep in the family, and all of a sudden Kim starts owning, well, you know what? I'm going to experience some black sheep stuff because this is awesome. My egoic ability of holding that black sheep, award
Yeah.
gets threatened, right?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, I'm the black sheep. You don't get to do that. Wait, that's me, that's mine. And it gets competitive on a subconscious level and sometimes on a very conscious level.
Yeah.
If I'm always the one in the family. This is my story that I wrote in Confident Empath. My story is very broken out in that book. And when I was always the one in the older siblings of the family, when I chose to step back from being the one in very many ways, my ripple down sibling effect was like, well, crap, if you're not the one, then well, who's going to be the one? Like who's going to do that or who's going to be in charge of that? Or oh crap, does that mean I have to be in charge? No, I'm not going to be, and responsibilities shift and things like that. And it all changes and it freaks people out.
It does. Absolutely. Oh, well, and from a different perspective, I decided not to go back into the corporate world. And that was a huge
Hmm.
choice, one, but the impacts to relationships was so interesting. You really find out quickly who's supportive of whatever you're doing and how you do it, and
With
who's
no
not.
judgment.
Everyone has a judgment or an opinion, or you should be
Yep.
this, you should go do that, you should be. I'm like, no, I'm good.
Yep.
Thank you for the input, but I'm good.
Yeah.
It was really crazy for me, and I have good relationships with some of the people, but a lot of the people are no longer. Um, while I see them periodically, it's not,
A
you know,
priority. Yeah.
yeah, right.
Because it's not supporting where the energy is moving toward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Mm-hmm.
collaborative at least. So
Right.
it is very difficult when we change and then they change or don't. And I actually went through, for people that know my story, I'm not going to go into it, but I had a year of really big health issues where I was actually really struggling with massive health issues. And that rocked my immediate family boat so bad in that my children were like, yeah, but you don't get sick, mom, because like you always work on yourself and you can't fix this. Wait a minute, you can't fix this. And it was really obvious for a period of time that everyone got scared
Mhm.
because I was so controlling and overpowering of I'm always the one, I'm the one, I'm the one, I'm the healthy one, I'm the one that will fix this, I will help you get fixed, blah, blah, blah. And that was, my ego lesson. But I learned through my sickness on how much everyone was shocked that I wasn't up to speed or I wasn't up to par in an emotional level and a physical level. And it terrified people. And I
Mhm.
thought that was really scary. That was
Mhm.
really scary, and it made me twice as scared because I'm like, "Well, God, I must really be bad then if everyone's scared," right?
Well,
It
yeah,
it was
because
big.
they're reacting to you and your reactions, and when it's so out of the norm, it's like, "How do
Yep,
we fix this? How do we fix this? What do we have to
yep.
do?"
Like,
And
and how come she's like this? This isn't what she does. This isn't
yeah.
what she does, and right at that moment in time, it was what I was doing, and that was really a good lesson for me and a good lesson for everybody.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean that I'm that way in 2 months from now or 2 years from now. There isn't an ongoing, I have to stay in that storyline lane of life, and it's very important for us to know that we get to merge, we get
Right,
to exit, we get to
right.
change the highway, we get to do anything we want to, but it's up to us to have that, I guess, conviction inside of us that says, this is where I'm at right now.
Mhm.
And it isn't this. This
No.
is where I'm at right now. Because a lot of people will get to this point.
Mhm.
This is where I'm at, and that's anger and it isn't truly owning the change. When we're at the place where we're truly owning it, we're doing it in a love base that this is self-love. I'm examining things, I'm changing things, I'm modifying things, I'm releasing things, I'm bringing things in.
Mhm.
This is my right. I get to do this.
Yeah, I
It's
do think though that many, including myself, went through kind of the stages of death and dying. Like
Yeah.
I was so angry when I lost my job, the when I was let go from a company and so hurt and how could it possibly happen to me? And then grieving and missing it, missing the people, missing the work, missing it's like it just I went through a lot of stages before I actually got to that point
Right.
of, oh my gosh, this is a great opportunity and probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me.
Mhm.
It took a while to get there.
Well, and let's unleash that even a little further, Kim, in that I have very many people that I'm aware of in my life that have never moved beyond a loss in the grieving process of a job or a person in their life because their story was so intertwined. For example, if I
Yeah.
lose a child, I never get over my grief and move forward because I'm their mom. Well, okay, but you're also just a soul down here having an experience, and that soul was also a soul. There's not a hierarchy of you being the mom and the kid. I mean, when we really start to dig through these soul lessons and essences and how we work and how we're here, and we can start to honor the fact of I'm not going to have my whole life come to a halt because of this. I get to honor the fact that that child's soul knew what they were doing, but there's many people that never move onward, right?
Right.
Same thing with a job. I lost my job, which is my identity, and this is a
Mhm.
man thing more than women, sorry to say,
Mhm.
because we force that on them in society because that is a lot of their masking, but women just as much these days,
Mhm.
of course, because we're working just as much, if not more. So these are really difficult things. This will also go into retirement. This is why a lot of people, they look forward to their retirement. They look forward to their retirement. They lose that so-called mask and identity and storyline, and they don't know who they are. Or the parent has the child move out to college and they don't know who they are. Or the parent has, somebody gets married and leaves the country. They don't know who they are. And these are really big indicators that you're living the storyline and wearing the mask versus going inward and finding the purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Been there, done that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a really big deal.
It's a big deal. I mean, the identity thing connected to any of those scenarios is where it's most difficult
Yeah.
because you're dealing with your ego and again, validation and all the things that come with that title or whatever you were that
Hmm.
in your story. So yeah, it takes time and work.
Yeah. I think this is the never ending story.
It is. It is.
The story is a never ending story, right? Okay, any other questions? Did we nail that one pretty well, do you think? Or
I think so. I mean, ask questions, if you have them.
yeah, and you watch yourself doing the old I can'ts and I shoulds. These are indicators for me. When we're working in those, well, I can't do that because blah blah. It usually is relating to a fear fuel, which is a storyline. you know, I get to, and I'm choosing to, is really a love-based fuel that is saying I'm taking command of my story.
Right.
Whether I'm owning the story because someone gave it to me, but I'm owning it, you know?
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's also a piece. I did that because my mom had a storyline in our home when I was growing up that the door was always open. There was always enough food to feed a kid, a straggler, someone could sleep on the couch or the floor in the kitchen. You know, I mean, that was kind of a storyline. And I adapted that as a mother, and I had 8 zillion kids in my yard with a skateboard park in the back. And so I came to a realization with that storyline that I'm doing this partially because this is how I was raised.
Mhm.
And I don't want 40 kids in my freaking backyard going through my refrigerator at random. So I had a little sit down with myself and said, do you still want to believe the storyline and the narrative that your house is always open? Or do you want to modify that and have some boundaries?
Yeah.
And I took number two. I did believe still that that was an important value system that I got from my family, but I got to also take that and modify it, that there's rules. You don't get to do this, this, or this, and
Mhm.
you're allowed to do this, this, or this. So I took command of it. But the hard part on the flip side of that was still going, okay, um, I also don't get to be resentful when I have 4 kids on my floor in the morning.
Right, right.
So it's self monitoring that
Mhm.
you made this choice, and it's okay for you to follow through with that choice. So
Mhm.
that's kind of where that's at.
Yeah, and I'm sure your children have adopted your
Oh yeah,
modified version,
yeah,
potentially. You
yeah,
know, it just keeps going. So
yeah.
it's interesting how our stories are so intertwined, what we adapt, you know, and then when you have the realization you need to make a change, that you're in
And you
control
don't
of
get to tell someone to change their story just because you're changing yours, but the
it. Mhm.
greatest thing to do is teach by doing, meaning I'm just going to hold this for me, and then the other person goes, how
Mhm.
come Kim seems so much happier? That's interesting, you know, and then they broach you, and then you can share. But to shove that down somebody's throat is not, you know, appropriate either. So
No, not at all.
yeah,
Not at
honoring
all.
the other story. It's a
Right.
hard one.
They have to go through it for whatever their reason is or
Yeah,
whatever their purpose is. So
yeah, that's a
yeah.
hard one.
This was really a fun one.
Good.
It's good to refresh, and it
Yeah.
brought back that terrifying feeling of what my story was. It's true.
And mine again is really gutturally honest in the Confident Empath book. I mean, mine was a pretty big blow up story. And when I was writing that book, it was really humbling to admit I was going through the memory of admitting, holy cow, I really
Yeah.
was really riding a storyline. And it was embarrassing. And I vacillated back and forth, like, do I really share what kind of an ass I was? And I'm like, yeah, maybe
Yeah.
I really am going to
Yeah.
share that.
We all had
So
our moments. Yeah.
yeah,
Where we
yeah,
thought we were doing the right thing, you
yeah.
know?
And it was just convoluted, and it's okay. So
Yeah, it is. And by
cool.
the way, you can find, I'll have the connections to where you can find your book.
Okay, cool. Thank
Um,
you on
yeah.
the description.
Mhm.
Great. Or always just go to sworthley.com, or you can just even Google Confident Empath. Okay, on
And
behalf of Kim
watch for
and
your
I.
class. Wait, aren't you
Oh, is that
starting a class in May for
I
that?
think it's
So
going to be
watch on the
around May.
website.
I haven't picked the actual dates yet, but it'll be online. If you're on my actual mailing list under sworthley.com, you will get any information on when that class is. Definitely, there will be at least one class, if not some minis this coming year. So
Yeah,
just don't have those
perfect.
locked in yet.
Yeah,
So
good.
cool. Thank
Yeah.
you for mentioning that. Great. Share, like this video. If you choose, give it a like, give it a share, give it whatever comment. We appreciate you being here and spending time with us. Until next time, everybody, Cosmic Hugs.
Goodbye.